Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
At least 58 people have died, some 515 have been injured in a mass shooting in Las Vegas. The gunman, Stephen Paddock, was a 64-year-old white man living in a retirement village unknown to the police. The shooting broke out during an open-air music festival attended by thousands of people. Shortly after 10 o'clock local time in the evening, hundreds of bullets rained down on the festival goers from the Mandalay Bay Hotel as Paddock opened fire from his room on the 32nd floor. People ran for cover in panic. Some were crushed in the stampede. By the time the police managed to work out where the gunfire was coming from, Paddock had shot himself. The police say they found in excess of 10 rifles in his room. So far, nothing has been said about a possible motive. Well, James Cook is in Las Vegas for us tonight. And James, the US has experienced so many mass shootings, but this has left America deeply shocked.
Yes, that's right. We're just beside McCarran International Airport here. That's where this shooting happened, just beside the Mandalay Bay Hotel behind me. And as you say, despite that long list of shootings which the United States has experienced, a long and tragic list of massacres, this one stands out simply for its scale. I mean, this country is frankly awash with weapons. Guns are easy to get hold of, especially here in Nevada. There are plenty of people in the world who are either malevolent or mentally ill, so the combination shouldn't be necessarily an enormous surprise. And yet, as you say, the scale of what has happened here has stunned this city. In the cold Nevada desert, country music is warming the crowd. The time is 8 minutes past 10. The crowd, 22,000 strong, is uncertain. It takes a moment, a deadly moment, before they realise they are under attack. By now, a second round of bullets is raining down. There is a pause. The gunman is reloading again. He is high above them in a hotel. Panic follows, a scramble to live.
So we just hit the ground and just laid there and hang on to each other. And it was quiet for a bit, and then fired another 30 rounds, and then quiet. And then what we were doing was every time he had stopped, he was reloading. We had gotten up and started making our way towards the fence, and then he started shooting again, and we'd hit the ground.
By now, the scenes are at once frantically urgent and wearily familiar. They are Americans, and they know the drill. Run. One woman found refuge behind some vending machines.
We were sitting ducks, and you could hear the bullets coming closer, and then it'd get quiet, and they would like reload, and then they'd start going again. And the girl that was standing right behind me, about 2 feet, she got a shot in the stomach, and everybody thought at first it was just firecrackers, and then everybody just couldn't. It just kept going more.
We felt the shots, and then we ran to the hangar to airport, and we just kept running. It was.
Once we got out the back, we started seeing the people that were shot and the people that were dead, and that's when it hit me that this was real.
Police now know the gunman is in the hotel. Explosives ready. They prepare to go in.
I need everybody in that hallway to be aware of it and get back. We need to pop this and see if we get any type of response from this guy to see if he's in here or if he's actually moved out somewhere else.
Breach. One suspect down in 135, 432 Mandalay Bay. I have the floor.
He is dead, apparently having taken his own life. And he has left a city in chaos. The hospitals are overwhelmed. There are not enough ambulances.
We just need to get people over to the hospital, okay?
Okay, go ahead. Put them all in the back.
Okay.
With hundreds wounded, a desperate call rings across the airwaves. Please donate blood.
There were people hiding underneath my car for cover, and there was a gentleman that was shot, and he said, "Can you help me?" And so I put him in my car, and I had like 6 people in my car, people with out shoes, running just to get away. And
there is other urgent work too, identifying the gunman. He was Stephen Paddock, a 64-year-old man from Mesquite, an hour's drive from the Vegas Strip. He checked into the hotel on Thursday.
As far as his history and background, we haven't completed that part of the investigation yet, but we located numerous firearms within the room that he occupied.
The president has been in office for less than a year, but he knows the drill too.
It was an act of pure evil. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are working closely with local authorities to assist with the investigation, and they will provide updates as to the investigation and how it develops.
For a Western democracy, the United States has seen an astonishing amount of horror like this. But even here, this is carnage on a different scale. America's mass shooting disease now feels like a plague. James Cook, BBC News, Las Vegas.
As we heard there, more than 500 people were taken to hospital following the shooting. Our correspondent Dave Lee is at one of the hospitals where the wounded are being treated. So Dave, how are they coping with the sheer numbers of injured?
Well, this is one of several facilities where the injured have been taken. This particular place, the UMC Trauma Centre, is where some of the most seriously injured people would have gone, and they do seem to be coping particularly well. And it was interesting to note last night there was a huge effort from the community around Las Vegas, and indeed many of those other concert goers that weren't injured, in bringing injured people, whether it was on the back of trucks or in their cars, to the centre so they could get treatment as quickly as possible. And shortly after the shooting happened, officials here did put out a plea to have blood donations, and you can see just where I'm down the street from where I am now, there is a line of people queuing up to give blood, and we've seen that in several locations across the city. So it's fair to say that Las Vegas has really turned out to help with this. But of course, the hard work that's happening now is making sure that 515 injured figure doesn't result in as few deaths as possible.
Dave Lee in Las Vegas, thank you. Well, today's attack, as we heard, is just the latest of many mass shootings in America. The state of Nevada has some of the most relaxed gun laws in the US. Firearms owners don't have to register their weapons, and there's no limit to how many they can possess. Our North America editor John Sokol reports on the continuing debate about gun ownership.
America's been on alert for an act of terror, but not from someone like this, a 64-year-old white man living in a retirement community who liked to gamble and enjoyed country music. But what turned Stephen Paddock into America's deadliest mass killer is still a mystery.
There's not even anything I can say. I mean, how do you... I mean, my brother did this. This is like it was done, you know, like he shot us. I mean, if he'd have killed my kids, I couldn't be more dumbfounded. I mean...
From the White House this morning, the president sought to bind the wounds of a nation.
In moments of tragedy and horror, America comes together as one, and it always has.
Until now, the worst shootings were the nightclub attack in Orlando, where Omar Mateen killed 49 people in an act inspired by so-called Islamic State. And before that was the killings at Virginia Tech University, when 32 people were killed. But in terms of shock, surely nothing eclipses Sandy Hook in Connecticut, when 25, 6 and 7-year-olds were killed at their elementary school. An act of brutality so shocking that it moved the then president to tears.
They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, kids of their own.
Today, the two senators from Connecticut sought to reopen the age-old debate on gun control. Chris Murphy saying, "It's positively infuriating that my colleagues in Congress are so afraid of the gun industry. It's time for Congress to get off its ass and do something." while Senator Richard Blumenthal said, still Congress refuses to act. I am more than frustrated, I am furious. The gun industry in America is huge, but so are the numbers of deaths. Some 30,000 die each year from gunshot wounds. Yes, some are accidental, many are suicide, but a large number are homicides too. However, the all-powerful gun lobby, the National Rifle Association, has been successful in warding off moves to tighten gun ownership laws. And in President Trump, they have a true friend.
As your president, I will never, ever infringe on the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Never, ever.
In his address to the nation, Donald Trump said the American people would be seeking explanations. But the one issue he didn't touch upon was whether gun control could have played a part. The NRA believes that the way you stop a bad man with a gun is to have a good man with a gun. But how that would have helped in the circumstances of Las Vegas last night is anyone's guess. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
Well, let's go back now to James Cook in Las Vegas. And James, this morning where you are, the city is just beginning to take in the horror of what happened last night. What's the mood there?
Well, it's grim, as you can imagine, Fiona, and the city is just beginning slowly, parts of it at least, to open up again. Last night it was paralysed almost completely. Large parts of it, including the famous gambling strip, sealed off. I've been down the strip in the last hour or so, and we've been speaking to people there, and frankly I found a lot of people really dazed, some people shocked, some people who had survived the attack, who had been at that concert and had managed to get out, still really struggling to come to terms with what had happened, what they had witnessed there, and their own survival in the face of so much death. But I also spoke to people who were desperate to help. I spoke to 3 British nurses. They were too emotional even to speak on camera, but they told me they wanted to help, they wanted to find a hospital, they wanted to volunteer. We've heard of British soldiers too, who, when the shooting began last night, they'd apparently been here in Nevada for training. They were out helping immediately, and that's been the story across this city, as we saw with the fact that ambulances overwhelmed. People were loading the injured into their own cars, in some respects feeling like more like a war zone than a 21st century American city. But it's just only now beginning to come to terms with what has happened here, Las Vegas. And of course, as Dave was saying just a few minutes ago, there is still a battle going on to save lives. Hundreds, I'll repeat that, hundreds of people, more than 500 in hospital.
James Cook in Las Vegas, thank you. Well, let's return now to the United States, where at least 58 people have been killed, more than 500 injured at a music festival in Las Vegas. James Cook is there in Las Vegas for us. James, just bring us up to date with the latest from there.
Yes, this is the deadliest mass shooting in modern, recent US history. And it happened at the Mandalay Bay Hotel there. The gunman was high up in the hotel, showering bullets down onto the concert goers below in the shadow of the city's international airport. It was a terrifying attack which went on and on. People spoke of the gunman reloading time and time again. He's been identified as Stephen Paddock, a 64-year-old man who lived around an hour's drive from Las Vegas. And the police, so far at least, seem to be baffled as to why he would have done this. The FBI say there's no direct link that they know of between him and any terrorist group. He seems to have had no previous brushes with the law. He seems to have lived out a relatively quiet life. So no one seems to have any idea what was behind this. President Trump says this is evil. 58 dead and more than 500 injured. Even by the scale of atrocities here in the United States, this is breathtaking in its horror.
James Cook in Las Vegas, thank you.
Even in a country well used to mass murder, what happened in Las Vegas overnight is incomprehensible. At least 58 people have been killed and more than 500 injured in the worst mass shooting in US history. From the 32nd floor of a hotel room, a gunman armed to the teeth with semi-automatic weapons, opened fire on thousands of people enjoying a music concert below. Trapped in the open air, there was no cover for the victims and no respite from the killer. The gunman has been named as 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, a white man who lived nearby. He killed himself as armed police closed in on him. His motive is still unclear. President Trump described it as an act of pure evil. A warning that there are upsetting images from the start of this report by our correspondent, Robert Moore.
A warm Las Vegas evening and a packed crowd enjoying the music. Until this. Automatic gunfire that went on and on. After dozens of rounds had been fired, country and western singer Jason Aldean stopped singing, and the crowd fell silent. Still, many thought it was fireworks. Then the gunman raked the crowd again. And it became clear the American nightmare was back. A man with a gun and a grudge was shooting from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Concert-goers crouched on the ground, but there was no cover and nowhere to hide. Before they realized they were witnessing slaughter, many used their mobile phones to film what was happening around them. This is one of the hospitality tents. 1 minute people collecting drinks, the next running for their lives.
All of a sudden there was I thought fireworks, and then I saw a window come out and glass shatter everywhere, and then 2 or 3 more windows came out, and then an open machine gun fire out that direction. You could see the blinds from the window.
We heard what we thought were fireworks, and it looked like smoke from Mandalay Bay, and then he kept performing, and then we heard it again, and they cut the music, and everyone said drop, and everyone dropped, and then everyone just got up and they said run, and everyone started stampeding and charging.
Police closed the famous Vegas Strip while a SWAT team blew open the hotel room they believe the gunman came from. They say Stephen Paddock, a 64-year-old local man, killed himself before they reached him. They found 10 rifles with him. Police radio captured the moment they spotted the gunman's location.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the whereabouts.
An agent calls in from outside the locked hotel room.
Stand on the suspect's door. I need everybody in that hallway to be aware of it and get back.
Then the SWAT team moves, detonating explosives to force the door.
Breach, breach, breach.
Zebra 20 has 1 suspect down inside the room.
Oh my God!
The pavements alongside the concert venue became a temporary field hospital.
Right now, we need your truck.
From the sheer number of casualties and the nature of many of the injuries, the scale of this attack was becoming clear.
The number of people that have died associated with this event has increased. Right now we're using the number of 58. I just was informed that it may be 59 of an individual that may have expired at Sunrise Hospital.
For President Trump, it was the first time he's had to address the nation and show adequate empathy.
It was an act of pure evil. Melania and I are praying for every American who has been hurt, wounded, or lost the ones they love so dearly in this terrible, terrible attack. We pray for the entire nation to find unity and peace, and we pray for the day when evil is banished.
Hundreds of concert-goers are still being treated for their injuries. The British tennis star Laura Robson tweeted this picture, saying she'd been among the crowd but escaped unhurt. "I'm okay," she tweeted. "We were right there, sounding like fireworks at first. Then everyone started running. Scary." Like so many others, she had gone to see a concert, but ended up witnessing the latest chapter in America's horrific and bloody history of mass shootings.
Our correspondent Robert Moore reporting. We'll be joining him live in Las Vegas in a few minutes. Stephen Paddock lived in a quiet retirement neighborhood in a town 90 minutes away from the bright lights of Las Vegas. Nevada police say he had no criminal record, and Paddock's brother said he had no political or religious affiliations. And as Richard Pallo reports, his motive is still unclear.
A man with no military experience harbouring automatic weapons in a hotel room. Someone with no criminal record, now one of America's deadliest killers. Stephen Paddock's motive remains as much a mystery to authorities in Nevada as it does on the other side of the US in Florida to his stunned family.
There's not even anything I can say. I mean, how do you... I mean, my brother did this. This is like it was done, you know, like he shot us. No religious affiliation, no political affiliation, no, he just hung out.
And no history of mental illness?
Not a bit. I mean, he might have had one long gun, but he had them in a safe, and there's no, he had no machine guns. I moved his house. I mean, there were no machine guns.
Yet police searching his home in the city of Mesquite, an hour or so outside Las Vegas, have found further weapons and ammunition. Police describe the property as nice and clean inside. The 64-year-old is believed to have lived in this retirement village for a year or so.
So we haven't had any run-ins with him. We haven't had any contact with him in the past. So that makes it kind of hard for us to know how long he's lived here. It's a new neighborhood. These homes are in the area he is aren't more than a year old, most of them. So we're looking about that time period maybe. But as far as how long he's lived here, that's something that we're looking into. It just makes it unique because we haven't dealt with him in the past, which is kind of unusual.
His girlfriend, Marilou Danley, was not at the property either. She had initially been named as a person of interest, but has since been found outside of the US and is not believed to have been involved with events in Las Vegas. Paddock had, however, used some of her ID to check into the hotel on Thursday, leaving him 3 days to look out from the 32nd floor room and plan what he was about to do. Richard Pallo, ITV News.
America is joined together in sadness, shock and grief, said a clearly stunned President Trump, telling families of those who died in Las Vegas, "We cannot imagine your loss." The killer, Stephen Paddock, was found dead by police as they stormed the hotel room he'd been firing from, together with up to 10 weapons. A warning, there are distressing images in this report by our correspondent Kylie Morris. It begins with the moment the Country Music Festival came under fire.
As the star they'd come to see ran off stage, thousands of concertgoers appeared confused at first by the terrible transformation of what had been a peaceful, joyous night. They stood out in the open, exposed as automatic gunfire rained down with horrific effect. Not everyone immediately recognized what it was, but they knew they had to get away.
We're going to get trampled if we don't go. We're going to get trampled if we don't go. Let's go.
Lying flat as the shots rang out, running in the gaps between.
It's fireworks! It's fireworks! Stop! It's fireworks!
We heard what we thought were fireworks, and then everyone just got up and they said run, and everyone started stampeding and charging and knocking over grills, jumping over fences, getting out.
And every time there was a break, we ran and we ran. And I still wasn't even sure if it was actually bullets until one of the times we paused, our friend was like, the guy next to us got shot.
Everyone said hit the floor, so everyone was just like literally laying on top of each other trying to get out of the way, and the shots just kept coming, and so we were going down, and when we got down there was a man that was shot right there. They were trying to take him out. He was all bloody and he was unconscious, and one of my friends was helping him out, and we ran, and everybody's hiding everywhere. I mean, they're hiding under the bleachers and the stanchions and anywhere they could, and everyone's telling us to run as fast as you can.
Just be advised, it is automatic fire. Fully automatic fire from an elevated position. Take cover.
Glowing in the footage taken by fleeing fans, the golden Mandalay Bay Hotel, standing tall just across the road from the festival. Here's the moment when on the ground a police officer realises the shots are coming from the 32nd floor of that hotel.
What's going on, Jimmy? It's coming from upstairs in the Mandalay Bay. Upstairs, Mandalay Bay, halfway up. I see the shots coming from Mandalay Bay.
Its proximity and height meant that the gunman holed up in the hotel had a clear line of sight into the crowds from above. He had with him as many as 10 weapons, among them automatic rifles. Police have confirmed he was 64-year-old Stephen Paddock from nearby Mesquite, a retiree who'd checked in a few days earlier. He killed himself as SWAT teams entered the room, their calm just before the raid, a contrast to the mayhem he'd engineered.
Sit on the suspect's door. I need everybody in that hallway to be aware of it and get back. We need to pop this and see if we get any type of response from this guy to see if he's in here or if he's actually moved out somewhere else. Breach, breach, breach.
Stephen Paddock had no known criminal record. His brother at a loss to explain what he'd done.
We have no reason, rhyme, rationale, excuse. There's just nothing. Find out who sold him the machine gun.
When the president spoke, he made no mention of the battery of rifles and handguns nor the laws that allow one man to accumulate and use them, but he thanked the police for their timely intervention.
The speed with which they acted is miraculous and prevented further loss of life. To have found the shooter so quickly after the first shots were fired is something for which we will always be thankful and grateful.
While the president sought to close doors to terror from abroad, America was delivered its deadliest mass shooting through the windows of a Vegas hotel by an angry white man whose name appeared on no watch lists, but to whom military-grade weapons were easily available.
We need your truck. We just need to get people over to the hospital, okay?
The hundreds of injured people who were brought to Vegas hospitals in trucks and cars and a phalanx of ambulances are now undergoing treatment. Many are critically wounded. But for nearly 60 families already, there's no more waiting. Only the heartbreaking loss of someone who's not coming home.
Carly Morris reporting.
Sad to say it, but nobody's surprised when someone with guns takes innocent lives in America. But even by the standards of a nation that buried its children after Sandy Hook or clubbers after Orlando, what happened in Las Vegas marked a new nadir. There's the numbers, for one thing. When you add those hospitalized with wounds to those who died, nearly 600 people were casualties. Then there's the killer's arsenal, crazy even by the standards of these tragedies. Police found 19 rifles and 200 magazines, enough for thousands of rounds, in his hotel room. Mike Thompson has been piecing together the story, and as you might expect, his report contains some graphic scenes.
They came for a celebration of country music. What they got was terror. The deadliest mass shooting in US history began at just after 10 o'clock last night. A barrage of automatic gunfire, some at the outdoor festival mistake for celebratory bangs, rakes crowds of people. Petrified concert-goers begin to panic. Some fall to the ground. Others run for cover as bullets fired from the 32nd floor of the nearby Mandalay Bay Hotel rain down upon them.
It was quiet for a bit and then fired another 30 rounds and then quiet, and then what we were doing was every time he had stopped, he was reloading. We had gotten up and started making our way towards the fence, and then he started shooting again and we'd hit the ground.
We felt the shots and then we ran to the hangar to airport, and we just kept running. It was...
Flashes from the gunman's weapons were spotted coming from high up in the hotel. Shortly before midnight, several SWAT teams were sent to the 32nd floor.
I need everybody in that hallway to be aware of it and get back. We need to pop this and see if we get any type of response from this guy to see if he's in here or if he's actually moved out somewhere else.
breach. One suspect down in 135, 432 Mandalay Bay. I have the floor.
When officers broke in, they found that the gunman, who had 19 rifles, had killed himself.
Now our suspect was identified as Stephen Craig Paddock, 64 years old, a white male from Mesquite, Nevada. We have no investigative information or background associated with this individual that is derogatory.
So far, investigators have no idea what Stephen Paddock's motives were, but it's believed he was acting alone.
As this event unfolds, we have determined to this point no connection with an international terrorist group.
Paddock lived in a retirement complex of about 1,400 homes. By all accounts, it's a quiet community.
The fact that my brother did this is, there's nothing. I mean, there's absolutely no.
President Trump was equally bewildered by the terrible events of last night.
In times such as these, I know we are searching for some kind of meaning in the chaos, some kind of light in the darkness. The answers do not come easy.
Multiple, unfortunately, fatalities. You can see one of those victims right now on that stretcher.
Before this, the next worst mass shooting in the US was at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida in June 2016. 49 people were killed in that incident and a further 58 wounded. And there have been many, many others in recent years. This latest shooting sparked renewed calls today for US gun control laws to be tightened. But they've been met by this response from the White House.
I think that's something that we can talk about in the coming days and see what that looks like moving forward. I think one of the things that we don't want to do is try to create laws that won't create or stop these types of things from happening.
President Trump campaigned as a true friend of gun rights activists. After what's just happened here, it's a stance that's likely to be increasingly questioned.
Mike Thompson there. Rachel Crosby is a reporter from the Review-Journal in Las Vegas and was one of the first journalists on the scene. Rachel, what greeted you when you got there to the site of that concert? What sort of things did you see?
Well, I actually responded to University Medical Center, Nevada's only level 1 trauma center, obviously knowing that most of the initial victims were going to be transported there. The Las Vegas Review-Journal had several other reporters on the scene of this venue, which is just east of the Las Vegas Strip. It's in a very wide open space. Of course, you guys have seen through footage. So we had reporters out there, just several people. I mean, victims were being assisted by first responders, but also fellow concert goers, being taken in ambulances as well as personal vehicles. It's all hands on deck.
Rachel, the trauma centre there is used to handling a tiny fraction of this number of casualties. How on earth did they deal with hundreds of people with gunshot wounds?
Well, University Medical Center, as we know, trains very frequently for mass casualty incidents. I believe a spokesperson with the hospital confirmed that they had actually just trained this week, I believe Friday. We had an incident here in 2015 where a car veered up onto the sidewalk and hit several pedestrians. Obviously, those weren't gunshot wounds, but we had dozens of victims that were transported to UMC at that time. So the hospital itself is familiar with dealing with multiple victims. Of course, in this case, it was an unimaginable number. Spoke to some nurses just outside of the hospital who were just really in shock, just pushing forward and working as others filed in to help out staff. UMC, of course, because of the influx of victims, was not the only hospital that was involved. We have several hospitals in the valley. Others were taken to another hospital called Sunrise, which is also a trauma center. And some of those minor injuries were quickly dispatched to other hospitals throughout the valley. So really all hands on deck here, surgeons, nurses, staff.
These were clearly shocking scenes that you witnessed. They must have been very upsetting to you. How has the community responded more widely with blood donations, gestures towards the families affected, this type of thing?
Of course, one of the first things as a reporter I was seeing was people asking me on social media, where can I go to donate blood? And before the sun was up, there were lines outside of blood donation centers throughout the entire Las Vegas Valley. Very early on, they were at capacity, but people were still waiting in line just to be there all day to donate when they could. We've heard of several people dropping off water and sports drinks and snacks for first responders and victims. Police had very early on set up the entire police headquarters as a place for families and friends of people they couldn't get a hold of to come to, and they opened their doors for them just to seek information in person and to try to relieve those hospitals, which were obviously overwhelmed.
Thank you so much for joining us, Rachel. Obviously, difficult days ahead for the entire community there in Las Vegas.